Hey, Chad here with ChadCarr.net, LearnMixedReality.com, and I'm glad you're back for another session here where we create a game that will run on these mixed reality devices. And up to this point, the game logic is working. Everything seems to be chugging along. We are even given information back to the player by what the score is, where the P was, and whether they had a strike or not, what the high score is. But now we want to kind of just juice things up a little bit by adding in some animations. So when I actually click on an item and we get the P, that's one thing, but I actually want these things to shuffle around. So when the turn is over, or when the turn is first starting, I want the items to shuffle. So let's go ahead and dig right into it. So I'm going to create a brand new folder here. I'm going to call it Animations. All right, I'm going to open up the animation window. So go up here to Window, go to Animation. And I'm going to dock that right here beside Game for now. I'm going to close up the text here. And with Table selected, I'm going to hit Create in my animation window. And it's going to ask me what my animation name should be. So I'm going to go to Animations, and I'm going to call this Item Default. And so now in the Animations folder, we have Item Default, but we also have Table, because Table is what I selected when I hit Create. Okay, and so now we have Item Default here in this drop down, and we could create a new clip, and we will here shortly. But for the Item Default, what I want to do is actually set all my item positions for their default position, which is really where they're at right now. So 1, 2, and 3, right? So those are the items, those are positions they're in. And I'm going to simply say Add Property and go down here to Item 1, to the Transform and Position, and hit the plus sign right beside of it. And I'm going to do the same thing for the next two items. Position, plus. Item 3, Transform, Position, plus. Now this is my default position, and I really don't have any animation, so I'm just going to select the second keyframe that's over here and delete that. And I'm going to save the scene. Might as well save the project as well. And if we take a look at our table animator, and I have it docked right here beside scene, is where I've docked that in the past. So that's why it showed up there. You'll notice it has an entry point, and we're not going to do a deep dive into animations here in Unity, but just to kind of give you an overview of what's going on here, is Unity has an animator, and this is their mechanism system, which is basically just a state machine. And when you come in to this state, to the table mechanism, you're going to come into this entry state and end up with Item Default. And our Item Default doesn't really animate anything, it just has our items at the default location. But we want to make a second animation that's actually going to shuffle the items. So I'm going to click on Item Default. I have Table selected, click on Item Default and say Make New Clip. And this clip, I'm going to call it Item Animation. Could call it Item Shuffle if I wanted to. And you'll see another state got added in here. So we have the Item Default, and then we're going to have this Item Animation that will hook up here in a little bit. But under Item Animation, I also want to add in the same properties I did for Item Default. So we're going to go to Item 1, Transform, Position, add that. Same thing for Item 2 and 3. All right, so there's my positions. Now, this animation is going to run at 60 frames before it's over. So 60 frames in 1 second. Okay, if you want it to run slower, you could just reduce those numbers. I actually want this last keyframe to, instead of being 1 second, I want to take a second and a half. So I'm going to move this over to 1 1 second and half of a second, 1/30. And now this is the tedious part, but we're going to create by hand, and there's different ways to do this, but for this example, I'm just going to create by hand the intermediate keyframes that we need. So I'm going to go over here to Scene. I'm going to hit Record to start recording our animation. And when I do that, I'm going to select my first item here and kind of position around so I can see this thing. And so I'm going to do this at frame, instead of 30, let's go back to like frame 20. And I'm recording, so I'm going to move this one up, that one back, and slide that one over. Okay? And so now when I start scrubbing this, you can see the animation already happening. So all I do is set up my initial keyframe, which was by default where they're positioned, and then move it over somewhere and create a new keyframe and position my objects by hitting record. Okay, so I'm going to do the same thing over here by going to, let's say, position 40, and we're going to click on this button here to add another keyframe. And for this one, I want to have this guy all the way over. I'm going to have him there towards the center. Why don't you put that to 0? We'll move him up. And I'm actually going to move this keyframe maybe there. I'm going to then copy this keyframe. Again, you can set this up however you want to. But this is just the way I'm kind of working with it. And it's, you know, somewhat of a trial and error type thing. But once I take my thing over here, I'm going to paste them again. So now we're kind of looking at, we're coming up here, and then we're moving relatively quickly there. And now I want to modify my position here. And so on this one, let's take a look at the animation one more time here. So I'm going to bring this one back, pull this one down, pull this one up, copy all those, come back here, paste them. I'm going to move this one over. That one there. Pull this one back in the center. Copy again. Paste again. Pull this one all the way down. Start pulling this one over. Pulling this one all the way up. Copy again. Paste that. Bring this over. Item 3 over. And let's see what our animation looks like, because I may have actually moved them around too much. Let's see. So come here. So that's where I'm at, and then that's kind of where it needs to go. So I want to go back to my beginning position. So this guy here, actually, where was I at before? If I come over here, he's there in the center. He's coming back up. And I don't want them to collide. So I think I like the way he's moving. What I want to do with this, though, is kind of move him over there, I think. So let's see how this works. Oh, I guess I did that a little bit much. So let's select him and move him this way. Because I didn't mean to move my things quite so much. And it's going to be a little obvious. Let's watch that middle one. So he kind of goes over, back. Yeah, that might work. So let's hit, I'm going to stop recording and reset this to the very beginning and hit play. Yeah, I mean, again, you can tweak this all that you want to. Obviously, I'm sure yours is going to look totally different than what I just set up here. But I don't want to spend too much time just making this absolutely perfect. But this doesn't take a whole lot to get a little bit of animation and get a nice look and feel with your game. So that is great. We have created this item animation. We've created the item default animation, which doesn't do anything. We just play and it doesn't do anything. There's no frames to go to. And if we go to item animation and we hit play, then we actually see our animation there. So that's good. What I want to do now is actually be able to kick off this animation through our code. And so we're going to do that in the Animator. So in the Animator, by default, we're going to be in this item default stage, which they're not going to be moving at all. They're just going to be in their regular position. And then in item animation, I want item default to go to item animation. I'm going to do that by right-clicking on item default and saying make transition and connecting it to item animation. Now, when I do this, I can click on the arrow to actually look at my transition itself. And I can make this have a particular fixed time. By default, it's just going to, it'll have an exit time, which means when it's done playing, it'll exit at that point, which is fine for now. Depending on what you're after, you may not want to do that. But what I want to do is add in a condition here, but I need to have a parameter before I can make it conditional. Because basically what I want to do is create a parameter, which I'm going to do over here in my Animator window. Click on parameters, and then I can click on this little plus sign and say add in a parameter. I can either add in a float, an integer, a boolean, or a trigger. I'm going to add in a boolean. I'm going to just call it in motion. So if my items are in motion, so when we actually start the turn and we start shuffling the items, we're going to encode set that in motion to true. Okay, so in this transition, for my condition to actually get to this other animation called item animation, I'm going to hit plus here for my condition. And by default, it always shows our parameters, and the only one we have is in motion, and it's a boolean, so it knows it can either be true or false. And I actually want it to be true. Okay. Likewise, to go to item default to this, that's going to be there, but it'll just be there forever. So I'm going to make another transition back to item default, hit that, and add in a condition for that transition from item animation back to default, and say in motion needs to be false. When in motion is true, it's going to go to item animation, and when it's false, it's going to jump back to item default. So let's see what this looks like here. If I hit play, and we can see that our item default animation is just constantly playing because that's the default. And when I hit in motion, you're going to see the items are animating. And it's going to be in this item animation until I uncheck that in motion, in which case it'll come back to item default. And that's how the Mechanom state machine works. Is you just make you add your different states, in which case our states in this instance is our animations, or item animations, the default position, and then we have our item animation and we are transitioning based off of some condition. And this condition right now is because we have the parameter in motion, and if we set it to true, it's actually going to run the item animation. And likewise, if we set it to false, it's going to exit the item animation. So again, we check the box and we see the animation occur. And we can uncheck the box and the animation will stop. So I'm going to save the scene and save the project. And in the next session, we're actually going to hook up our code to talk to this InMotion parameter. Hopefully you're finding this tutorial series beneficial. If so, hit that like button. That way I'll know to do more of these. If you're not, then hit that dislike button. That way I'll also get that feedback as well. And if it is something that you are enjoying and you're not already subscribed, you might want to hit that subscribe button. That way you'll be notified as the next sessions come out. I'll be creating videos every single week around either the HoloLens or these immersive headsets, the occluded headsets for mixed reality. So I hope you have a fantastic week, and I'll see you in the next video.